Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm Diana Skaya. Back to our leading story now, the crisis unfolding in Georgia. Protests have erupted across the country as the government's decision to pause EU accession talks until 2028 and the recent parliamentary elections face harsh criticism. Now, with questions surrounding the legitimacy of the elections and the president's role in resolving the crisis, the Georgian nation's democratic future hangs in the balance. And joining me now here in studio to discuss the legal implications and possible paths forward is Jowanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor, Faculty of Law and Administration at the University of Warsaw. Thank you so much for being with us here this morning.
Thank you.
Jowanka, let me ask you this first. Let's begin with the role of President Salome Zurabishvili. What legal powers does she actually have to influence or resolve the current political crisis, and could she actually initiate steps towards new elections?
The role of president in Georgian system is rather limited, I would say. So, of course, it's not a full presidential system where president can really influence the situation to a large extent. Also, another important aspect is that her term in office is almost finished. So it's only several weeks that she is still in office. So her ability to influence the situation, of course, is to provide the leadership, which is unfortunately still lacking when it comes to gathering the opposition in Georgia. But also, of course, not only the leadership, but her position in terms of how she will interact with the government, and will she accept or will she not accept the government's action is also a crucial point at this stage.
What could be some two scenarios that we would look at? I mean, is there a legal pathway for her to be actually removed from office?
As I just said, her term is close to finishing.
Although she said that she's going to stay and that she won't leave.
That is true. That is her statement. However, again, from the legal perspective, it is very difficult to assess how the situation could be solved, because her term is close to finishing. And let's say there is no clear constitutional legal base on which grounds she could just remain in office. Of course, we can discuss the legitimacy of the government's action. We can discuss to what extent the relationship between the office of the president and the office of prime minister and the whole government, what kind of situation we have here now. However, legally wise, it will be very difficult for her to retain the position.
What is the mandate of the elected government?
The mandate is here problematic because the government was not elected based on the statements, on the program statements that they will withdraw the European aspirations of Georgia. Even more, in Georgian constitution, there is a clear statement that Georgia foreign policy is directed towards EU accession, NATO accession. So this is very clear stated in the legal framework of Georgian state, which means that the government who is currently making the efforts to pause the talks with the European Union to withdraw from the candidacy talks with the European Union is not based on Georgian constitution, and this also creates such a frustration among a large part of Georgian society, because the government is not acting within their mandate. So it is not the potential possibilities, yes, of their action. Yeah.
How significant are the legal implications of the EU statement that Georgia's recent parliamentary elections were neither free nor fair? What can you tell us about that?
It is very significant because, again, there is a specific relationship between EU and Georgia, who has been granted candidate status just last year. So currently there is a special relationship between the two, and the European Union, of course, closely observes what is happening in Georgia and has very significant doubts, whereas the elections have been fair and free. And these kind of statements from European Parliament, European Commission are very important in describing the situation. So here again, it is supposed to also support the dialogue in Georgia.
Can the government's decision to suspend EU accession talks until 2028 actually be legally challenged? Can something be done about this?
Well, exactly. So we have the Georgian constitution, which clearly stipulates that the efforts of Georgian government should be based on reaching as soon as possible the membership of the European Union and also the Western organizations. So here the government seems to be breaking the constitution, seems to be not in line with the priorities which are enshrined in the Georgian constitution. Therefore, indeed, the actions of the government should be challenged and should be also criticized, not only internally but also externally.
From maybe your previous work or something that you've seen in the past and in different scenarios and situations, do you think that the protests that are unfolding in Georgia could actually help resolve the situation? I mean, a lot of youth are really taking place. We can see them being on the streets, not just in Tbilisi, but in Batumi and all across the country. Do you think that they will be successful in trying to get their voices heard and bringing about this change?
Indeed, I'm also in a close contact every day with my Georgian friends who are, part of them are protesting actively on the streets of Tbilisi. And there is a very strong opposition towards the government statements and activities. And also Georgian people feel that the government is taking away from them their hopes and their future. So there is a very strong resistance, there is a very strong spirit in the Georgian society. Georgians were fighting for their independence for many centuries, and they are just not simply willing to let it go. So the protests are not only in the capital, as you mentioned, but also in other cities. The parts of diplomatic corps also joined the protest.
Many have left as well.
Exactly. So the government administration is also joining the protests. So there is a huge movement in Georgia currently to defy the actions of the government. And whether they will be successful, of course, it remains to be seen. However, I'm sure that the spirit and the strength of the Georgian nation is going to prevail.
What do you think it's going to take for the Georgian dream to kind of shift away from this pro-Russian stance? Is it going to be able to listen to what the Georgian citizens want?
Well, the government is not saying that they are pro-Russian. Actually, they still claim that they represent the independence of Georgia, independence both from Russia. Yes, they claim that they represent independence both from Russia and both from Western pressures, which means that they claim that they have this, let's say, independence of the country in mind. However, looking at the geopolitical situation of the country, it is clear that currently there is also a pressure from the Russian side on Georgian government to distance themselves from the European Union and also from the legal framework that membership in the European Union and NATO would impose on Georgia.
I know you talked about this just a little bit earlier, but what can the EU do to influence Georgia's domestic politics? There's something that can be done.
Well, Georgia is not a member state of the European Union, so it is an external actor. Also, European Union has, let's say, again, limited mandate to be able to influence internal policy of Georgia. So in the end of the day, it is always up to the government of a sovereign country and up to the citizens who elect the government to say whatever their choices, political choices are. So the actions of the European Union indeed are limited. So whatever was possible is always based on the partnership between European Union and the country. So again, Georgia being granted the candidate country status had the possibilities to again be, let's say, beneficiary of many activities of the EU. However, still the limitations persist.
Thank you so much, Jowanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law and Administration at University of Warsaw, for breaking down the legal aspects of this crisis that has shaken up Georgia.
My pleasure, thank you.
And that completes this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Stay tuned for more news with Sally Yastrzemska up next.